Well, Chris, you could indeed say that all roads have been leading here. I'm in my tropical climate right now. I've got my shaved head, and we are ready to end this thing, at least for now, with the latest installment in the Fast and Furious F9 underscore the Fast Saga. Chris, you've watched all the movies. You're all prepped. You're officially part of the cult, man. You got anything to say before we start?
Yeah, man, I just love that you're wearing your Fast and Furious shirt and I'm wearing my Jurassic Park shirt.
I think this should go on record as this is the first time that I've ever worn the appropriately themed shirt for the movie that we're talking about.
Yeah, and possibly the crossover of the century to come. So we'll
Dude,
see you guys in the podcast, it seems.
stay tuned. F9, it's officially happening, man. We didn't think we would see the day. We didn't think we would see it, but yet here we are, man. It finally came out in theaters. Is it the savior of theaters, the way that every fucking publication in the world is trying to say, or did this just happen to be the latest installment in this ever more growing stupid saga that everyone just turns out to watch?
Honestly, I think that the whole is it the savior thing, any film that comes out further into the future could potentially be the savior because we've been going to the theaters since things opened up. We went and saw Nobody. There was one other person in there with us. Then we go and we see like a In the Heights type film around that time frame, and there's a few more people. And now we're here, and the theater was almost packed at like a 6 p.m.
Don't
showing.
forget about Quiet
So
Place. Don't forget about that.
right, exactly. Quiet Place, In the Heights, they kind of came out more when people were getting a little more comfortable. But now there was even more people in the theaters than when we went and saw films like that in that time frame. So I just think like, yeah, it's obviously the savior for now, and then 2 months go by and even more people get comfortable with going to the theaters, and then that's the savior.
And then the next one
Like
is the
the
savior.
the
It's just
press, and
ever
I don't want to
growing
get too much.
hyperbole.
Yeah, exactly. It's all hyperbole. I don't want to get too much off the topic, but considering that, a big criticism of this film was the central focus, I think I can take a little creative liberty here and just deviate for a second before we get into it. When I say that click-based media is the downfall of anything that we know and love when it comes to getting our news or entertainment news or anything like that. Like that, is this the savior? Is fishing for a story.
It's true. It's true. I just wanted to read off one Facebook post from the Facebook group that I'm in that I've gotten multiple screeners for. That basically said the 4 p.m. IMAX showing of F9 at Lincoln Square was absolutely packed, and the entire audience cheered and hollered and screamed when they went into space. We back. And then there was a comment. Apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently someone else commented on that and said, "Wait, is this not the exact same showtime that someone tweeted about about somebody in the audience audibly getting a blowjob?" Which that's just fantastic, right there. If like you want to talk about like normally you're right. I'm 100% with you as far as kind of the hyperbole of click-based news, but just in order to get stories like that, like it's worth it. So
People are back to being people.
oh, they are. Well,
That's all that tells
yeah,
me.
well, the question is are they back to being people, or are they still the same? And it's just a matter of but they're back to doing it in public and getting captured doing stupid shit on social media. Which I
Sounds
feel
like a different podcast for a different day, but
yes,
you know.
indeed. But so, dude, I mean, we literally just spent the last 8 weeks introducing you to the saga. So let's get into it, man. Spoiler-free thoughts. Like, what did you think just of this movie? I know it's going to be hard to kind of, I feel like, talk about these without talking about the saga as a whole, but just individually with this movie, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so, you know, I had a great time with this series. I enjoyed the ride. I thought it was something that I grew to love that I never thought I would. And, I think the big franchises of today kind of, I think I wrongfully lump them under the same umbrella because I had done a huge MCU binge during the pandemic and really upped my knowledge and crossed off so many of the films I hadn't seen. And I had caught up on Mission Impossible, which is arguably very close in regards to the Fast and Furious franchise. And they both just weren't for me. I also went and I caught up on the DCEU. Even though there was not that many films, there were still a few that I just hadn't seen. And I made sure that I saw them all. And I realized while the DCEU was like the one I enjoyed the most out of all of these franchises, they all share so many similarities that I just felt discouraged. I said, wow, is this what we're heading? It's, same, same movie, but with a different sort of cosmetic look on top of it, aesthetic on top of it. And it was very disheartening. And So I was a little bitter going into this, but this franchise, like I said, it like quite literally, I fell in love with it. It's the silliest I think of all the big franchises we have running right now, but I also think that's a part of its charm. And I did not expect to enjoy so many of these films in the way that I have. Going back, revising my rankings, trying to be as honest as I can to get to this point. And to be honest, not many films aside from the bad ones fell down a totem pole. It fell down a point or two on my scores on my letterboxd. I mean, they really have held their own water, which is for some of them, like the first three, it's been almost 2 months now since we did those recordings to release them. So the fact that they've stayed that consistent in regards to how I rate and rank films for this long, I think really speaks to just the quality, and as we lose quality, you still have the lovability of the family here. And I think that's a big part. And at least it keeps some sort of human thread throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, look, I've been with this franchise a long time, a long, long time. Not as long as some other people, because I mean, this year is the franchise hits 20 years, which is still fucking insane to me. But how one franchise can continue for that long, like no offense, but for all of that, Marvel was touting that 10 years a couple years ago when Infinity War came out, and this franchise has been rocking a solid 20. Not to mention the fact that this is probably the only original blockbuster IP franchise that's going on, because even the Mission Impossible movies are based off of the old TV show from the 60s. So the fact that this is original and it's as diverse as it is, I know a lot of people like to tout like the whole supposed diversity that Hollywood puts out when really it isn't, but like this franchise is like the first one that's like actually incredibly diverse and does not subscribe to any of like the typical Hollywood BS, which is why I've always kind of given this a lot of credit above kind of the rest of the generic action franchises. But that's just the objective standpoint, right? This is Fast and Furious. I'm not here to be objective, right? I've been with this franchise since I was 12, 13 years old when I saw Fast 5 in the theaters for the first time. I'm only here to talk about family and how fucking stupid these stunts were and how awesome they were. But if I could say one thing to me that this film definitely captured, that we'll say the last couple since Furious 7 kind of missed, right? Because we talked about this on our Fate of the Furious and our upcoming Hobbs and Shaw first time watch, which will be dropping 2 weeks after this comes out. The thing that those movies seem to be missing, besides obviously one Paul Walker, is the fact that it seemed to be kind of missing that element of family that kind of made a lot of these movies so special, right? Because even in the supposed kind of worst movies in like the franchise's earlier days, when they weren't sure if they even had a franchise, when they kept trading up people in and out, they still kind of always had that kind of everlasting sense of camaraderie. Like even in Tokyo Drift, when Sean bonds with Han for the first time, like you get that sense where you're like, okay, like even though the seeds weren't there at the time, you still felt like this was a part of something bigger, you know, in a way that it really doesn't feel like that with most franchises. And even though this film has its fair share of silly stuff and fair share of stupid stuff, and like we were all at the theater last night watching this movie. Me, it was my second time watching it. I swear to God, watching you guys watch this movie was even better than it was watching the movie the first time. And I already watching that movie the first time was already probably one of the most fun times I've had in the theater just in my entire life. And this film definitely, I feel like, brought back a lot of the elements that it felt like were missing in the last couple. Where the last couple movies, it felt like these were starting to devolve and slide into more generic action movie territory, you know? And it took me a couple times with watching Fate of the Furious where I'm like, oh, no, is this... I'm like, it's a victim of 2017. Is this going to go down the rabbit hole that all these other action movies did? And we were worried, like we were talking about it. It's like, okay, is Justin Lin and the Return of Han going to be kind of the fuse that this franchise needs? And while I don't necessarily know if it was, I can definitely say that this movie brought back a lot of the elements that, to me, is what made the Fast and Furious movie special. Not at all a perfect movie. Heavily, heavily flawed. Don't get me wrong. We got a lot of stupid shit that we're going to talk about that happened in this movie. But as far as those elements go, those elements are what sets this movie above not only the last couple entries in this franchise, but also kind of the rest of the ilk, let's say, of action movies that were starting to become super generic.
Yeah, and it is a very, like, I want to touch on a few of your points there, like in regards to the whole diversity thing. Like, yeah, this film just cast what it feels like are the best characters for the role, and it didn't matter their race, nationality, creed, any of that. Like it just happens to be a beautifully diverse cast, and they all work perfectly. Like no one else could play Roman. It
No
doesn't
one.
matter. Like there's so many talented actors out there, no one else could play him. Ludacris, surprisingly a great actor, and you
Yeah,
can't replace him.
really
Like
good.
obviously no one's going to be able to play Letty or Dom. Like it's just, so it's like, yeah, this movie does what Hollywood loves to pat themselves on the back for, yet we don't see that much of it, which is awesome, because considering they started before people were a little more conscious of that, it just kind of shows like the change I think that we all want to see as movie fans. Like in that representation side, it's very interesting to see how like this is the franchise that does that. Because of all the flack it gets, I think people always want to come into a review of these movies in a jokey and silly manner, and certainly this film out of any others warrants that the most. But they also kind of do a lot that you shouldn't take for granted. Like even with the scope of these films transitioning from street racers who are like low level city crime bosses to becoming super spies, like for the most part I don't know anyone else who could pull it off in the way that they have. Yes, it's zany, yes it's crazy, but also at the same time it's not too far fetched when you watch them all. I mean, there's a consistency there,
Yeah.
and I
There's a
think that they
gradual build throughout the movies that allows the
right.
silliness to be like more acceptable as time goes on.
And I will say, I think F9 is, while there have been previous jumping the shark moments, I think this is fully where we've ended up on, no pun intended, a different planet. But I mean, think about this, okay? Think about this. I didn't plan for that either. That's
Oh,
amazing how that
that's what
happened.
makes it even better.
But
That's what makes it even better.
think about this, right? We, at least with this franchise, had Justin Lin, who's directed a plethora of films. We had one writer who, up until this film, was here for the entirety of it. So, like, there has been some tender love and care. That whereas much as the DCEU has some hits, like those 3 Snyder films, which I really love, I tout Man of Steel all the time in our friend circle as one of the most underrated comic book
I'll come
films of all
around on
time.
that movie, honestly.
But the thing about it is, it's like, the reason why we have such tonal differences in the DCEU is because there's not that core thread, that communication. Whereas Fast and Furious, yes, it's crazy, it's ridiculous, it's nuts, especially where we're at right now. But at least it feels like we got there in a way that makes sense. So like, I do have to give them some credit for going on for 20 years, for still making billions of dollars, and just managing to not implode on itself. I mean, that is a big feat.
Yeah, it really is. And like, it's funny because I feel like every time that I want to like come out and be like and join in on the crowd that just likes to dog on these movies, every time I watch them, it gives me that one reason that it like reminds me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I love this franchise. It's for the little moments, you know. You and I have talked a lot about these movies in the last like 8 weeks that we've been doing these first time watches, but one of the biggest things is that like, yeah, their characters are actually like really awesome. And the reason why we can still buy into the silliness is because we love these characters and we love watching them do stuff and we love watching them interact. And even though the character of Dominic Toretto has evolved from like a pretty dope human being that like anybody can fall in love with to like this superhuman who literally achieved god level status in this movie, like that, I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but let me know. But either way, like Dominic Toretto is officially no longer human in this movie. Like I know they've been hinting at it the last couple movies, but this was the one where he officially achieved god level status. But we're still on board with him because every time he cracks one of those cheesy ass one-liners or mentions family for the 18,000th time for the row, you're like, you like that because you still remember Dom and you still remember those humble beginnings because they keep bringing it up as them referencing DVD hijackers, even though they've gone and become like these Bond-esque super spies with these superhuman abilities that are fighting drones and submarines and swinging across bridges like Tarzan. Like, we still love it because we still love these characters because that's ultimately what it is.
Exactly. You nailed it on the head, and I think it's time to move into other segments. So before we jump out of our spoiler-free section, I just want to share with everyone what my grandma said when I told her what movie I was going to see last night. And she said, "Oh, I've seen the commercial for that one. That's one," she said, "that's the one with the big, bald muscle guys who drive the car into outer space, right?" I said, "Yeah, that's the plot. Honestly, that's the plot."
Nailed it. Dead on with that.
Yep,
that's
dead
hilarious.
on. So what were your guys' spoiler-free thoughts for Fast and Furious F9, the Fast Saga? Oh man, I can't wait to get into this. But before we do, please subscribe, hit that bell so you get notified and you never miss when we post a video. And of course, help us out a lot. by giving this video a like. It honestly does more than you would think. So
It does.
with that being said, Roman begged a great question in this
He
film,
really
Dom,
did. He really did.
and we're here to discuss if he was right. So I have to ask you, dude, like, is this the new Marvel? Are they superheroes? Are they invincible? Like, was Roman right?
I mean, look, let's face it. These movies have essentially become the Marvel, in a way, a better version of the Marvel movies. I think the only difference being that rather than the Marvel movies, which tend to branch off and focus on these individual characters before bringing them into the team-up, these movies just skip all that and just put us right into the team-ups every time. And that's why they keep getting progressively more and more awesome, because I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Watching Captain America on his own, right? But the problem is that the quality of the individual solo character Marvel movies kind of waxes and wanes. But at the very least, I know when I'm getting a team-up movie, I know I'm going to get something awesome. That's why, like, I'm kind of less harsh on the team-up movies than I am on the individual movies, because I just know I'm not going to get the same type of impact from them. Sorry. And the Fast movies kind of solve that problem immediately by just saying, starting with Fast 5, where they're just like, nah, fuck it, we're just gonna do team-up movies every time. And I wanted to bring up a couple other points that I just had off the top of my head. I was listening to a podcast, a ranking of these movies yesterday on the Big Picture podcast, and Amanda Dobbins actually brought up one of the probably the funniest points I think yet, which kind of sums up all of our problems with the titles of these movies, which is that, wow, the only place where they actually decide to be like kind of clever is with the titles, which
So true.
so true. But like, I feel like before we even get into kind of the whole invulnerability aspect and whether these are superheroes, I feel like since this is like we're in spoiler territory now, I feel like we just have to break down like what actually happened in this movie, because I think that I said to you, and I said this to a couple different people after I saw this movie, which is where I'm like, wow, for a Fast and Furious movie, there's a lot of plot that happens in this movie. Like, a lot. I know the Fast and Furious movies, they tend to be a little bit more plot heavy than the last one. Obviously, we know the first movie is essentially a remake of Point Break, but with cars. We know that. We're not here to talk or debate that. But, like, can we just, like, break down what happens in this movie? Because, weirdly enough, I feel like this is probably the only time where we can actually do this. Where, essentially, the plot of this movie is that Dom and Letty are living off the grid. Roman, Tej, and Ramsey show up, be like, hey, Mr. Nobody captured Cypher from the last movie, you know, the villain from Fast 8, who was played by Charlize Theron. His plane got hijacked randomly, and now we gotta go get this super secret piece of, like, crucial information, latest MacGuffin, whatever. The Fast and Furious have kind of gotten into the MacGuffin game as well. Another reason why I feel like it's not unfair to compare it to Marvel. They go to this random, again, I'm like, wow, it's good to see that we're bringing back that 80s trope of just making up random, made-up South and Central American countries. And they find out that the person that they're up against is none other than Dom's secret, long-lost, who we had no idea who was the thing, brother, Jakob Toretto, portrayed by John Cena. And the film then goes on to give us this CW-esque lifetime flashback where we get to see, like, kind of the origins of Dom and Jakob growing up and what led to their estrangement, obviously, which is tied in with the death of their father, who was played in a surprising moment by Mayans MC Lee, JD Pardo. And the movie just then goes, and you want to talk jumping the shark? No. I still stand by the statement. We jumped the shark 3 movies ago with F7 when they drove a fucking car through 3 buildings. That was this franchise's jumping the shark moment right here, right? We're traveling internationally. We're in London. We got the Tokyo Drift guys back, and they're making rocket cars. Fucking Mia shows up out of nowhere, and just in order to name drop Brian and continue to remind us, oh yeah, even though Paul Walker's dead, Brian is still a thing in this franchise. We find out that Jakob, it turned out, worked for Mr. Nobody in the past. And then, and that's not even getting into the Han of it all, which we gotta save for our Han segment, because, like, there's a whole relationship that Justin coming back to this franchise that kind of ties in with Han and that character. So I'll save that for later on. But, like, oh my god, the amount of plot, flashbacks, over-the-top stuff, right? We know what we get with a Fast and Furious movie. We go in, we're going to get a lot of references with family, we're going to get a lot of stupid stunts, and we're going to have at least one emotional hardcore moment. But this was the first time in, I think, any of these movies where I'm like, oh my god, I think I actually have to, like, focus and pay attention, because this movie's throwing a lot at me as far as that goes. And that's not even getting into the invulnerability aspect where, oh, all of a sudden now these movies are going to try and be meta. And these movies are going to try and be like, okay, so we're going to have Roman, who, again, has been the best fucking YouTube commentator throughout all of these movies since he made his reappearance in the franchise with 5. And it's him kind of, like, giving this, like, kind of pseudo-meta commentary track. Now they just full-on made him, like, essentially, like, kind of the commentator of this movie. And it's even gotten to the level where Roman even has a bit in this movie where he's like, guys, are we actually invulnerable? I just got shot at by 18 guys, and all that I have to show for it is a hole-filled shirt. Like, are we actually invulnerable? So that's where I gotta throw it back to you. What do you make of just, like, the amount of plot in this movie? Do you think that there's enough, that there is way too much plot in this movie going on for its own good, and, like, how that kind of ties together with the whole invulnerability thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where here's the disparity now between Marvel and the Fast and Furious franchise. Because while I would say arguably Infinity War and Endgame had a lot of paperwork and a lot of housekeeping to do to get
Yeah.
you to
Yeah.
understand what exactly was going on, they did it in such a way that, as much as I think, I can't stand CG screen films anymore. It was tasteful. It didn't take you out of the experience. You weren't having to sit there with a notepad in the theater and write things down. Whereas I felt a little underprepared because I left my writing utensils at home coming into this
Whoa.
one.
Whoa.
Thankfully, thankfully this was such a surface level movie where it didn't matter because it was all very predictable. But the thing is, they did throw a lot at you. I think a lot of that comes in the whole separation of the ensemble and sort of towards the end, the third act, everyone has their own piece to play. Whereas in other films that was present, in this one, it was very specifically where on all different parts of the world. I mean, hell, spoiler alert, Tej and Roman go into outer space. So it's like we obviously are going to get some alone time and some individual teamwork to make the dream work type of situation. And I will say it's thank God it wasn't convoluted. Thank God it was very straightforward and clean
Yeah.
cut and kind of hidden behind explosions and special effects. Because if this was a film you had to concentrate on, I don't think I would have cared enough if it was, more serious. I think the fact that they leaned into the whole jokey nature and had Roman be the sort of unofficial but really official YouTube commentator or sort of audience representation, I think had we not had that, I would have been bored because never have I had a film with this much plot where I'm sitting there wishing I could, like, it's strange because I wasn't really wishing I could check my phone, but I also felt like, man, like, what am I doing here right now? Like, yes, this is fun, this is funny, but the thing is, while it was fun and it was funny, I genuinely actually like this franchise for like serious reasons, and so a part of me felt the same way I did when we were watching that final Star Wars film. The Last Jedi.
Last
It
Jedi
just
or Rise of
felt
Skywalker?
whatever the last one was. I don't
Rise of
fucking care.
Skywalker. I don't
They all
blame you.
sucked.
I don't
The,
blame
the,
you.
the, the new the new three sucked, but I guess it was Rise of Skywalker. But a part of me felt like I did in that theater watching that film. It felt wrong. It felt dirty, and it felt like I was. It felt like I wasted time because of how much time we put into watching these previous films, and then it also felt sad because like a part of what I love about doing this podcast and this medium is like, and it's the reason I'm the TV guy, right? It's like getting hooked and addicted to characters over the span of a long term and watching them grow and develop and continuing to strive for more. And and it just feels wrong when you watch something you love like die in front of you, especially artistically, as we're both creators and artists. And so like a part of me was just like, after a while, it's like the laughing stopped being as fun as it was kind of sad, and pathetic. And so it's like that's why I'm like, maybe Roman, maybe they do need to embrace this sort of alternate reality Earth 2 type thing they were hinting at, because at this point the fact that they were still trying to hold on to a shred of, I would say, seriousness, I think there shouldn't have been any, because it just was sad for the people like me who genuinely really grew to love this franchise. Like, it just hurt a little bit. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, definitely. Like, my whole thing with it is that I'm not going to necessarily say my peak kind of has surpassed, but, like, my phase of Fast and Furious movies, let's call it, kind of ended somewhere between 7 and 8, right? 8, I loved it when I saw it in theaters. Obviously, we know I was inebriated beyond belief when I saw that, and upon subsequent viewings, I've started to realize, I'm like, oh, okay, this franchise has moved on. And now that we've quite literally passed the jumping the shark moment, my whole thing is, look, it's kind of damn near impossible for me to actually, like, critique these movies as far as that goes, but, like, I'm gonna critique on all of the shit that I'm gonna say that's wrong, and there was a lot of that in this movie, but at the same time, I'm also like, look, I don't come, this is probably the only time the only franchise where I can say this, where it's like, look, I'm not here in order to like kind of focus on the things that are wrong. Like, I'm just gonna enjoy those and kind of add them into my own private commentary track, because I swear to God, dude, I am pissed that I didn't like kind of sneakily like record my reaction to watching this movie the first time, because I swear to God, it might be the greatest commentary track I've ever done. Like, ever. Like, and don't get me wrong, I still got in a few comments last night that I wasn't able to get in the first time around, but oh man, I threw in some gems there. I think some of my favorites were, I'm like, when John Cena's partner, whoever the fuck that guy is, came in, I'm like, wow, they got the best Carrie Elwes impersonator I've ever seen. That was insane. And just the bits with the flashback, like, they were fucking dumb, and I knew that they were going to be bad, because I'm like, wow, just like, the only thing that could be dumber than Vin Diesel at this point in the franchise is somebody trying to play a younger Vin Diesel. And like, I don't want to throw any shade the actor's way, because the actor was just trying to play the part, and he was doing his best, but I'm like, oh man, this is doomed to begin with. And then like, and the movie also almost, I feel like, had to bend over backwards, not only with the amount of retcons it was doing within the rest of the franchise in order to like make Tokyo Drift more succinct, but also like how it almost had to remind you, like, oh yeah, there are other elements that are here. Like, first off, just reminding you that Charlize Theron is in this movie, where it's like, okay, we clearly wanted to do this thing with John Cena, but we have to continually remind you, okay, Charlize is still in this movie. Kurt Russell literally couldn't even be bothered to actually like be a part of the main action. He's only in flashbacks this time, the Mr. Nobody character, right? And that's not even getting into the whole Hobbs and Shaw of it all, where even though we all know about how bad the feud is between The Rock and Vin Diesel, and I feel bad for the work that these producers are going to have to do in order to be able to get The Rock and Jason Statham back for the next movie. But we know, obviously, that they still have, obviously, the Hattie Shaw, not the Hattie Shaw, the Magdalene Shaw cameo, the Helen Mirren cameo in this movie, in order to remind you, oh yeah, they're still part of this universe, right, and all that. It's like, it's so tough, because I'm like, yeah, they're all problematic and yeah, and stupid, but I'm like, I'm just having fun with it. I really am, and I'm laughing, and I'm commentating to myself, and I really can't do that with any other franchise, is the thing. So
no, yeah, and I see all your points, and I definitely agree with pretty much the majority of those points. And I will say, like, I obviously had a great time in the theaters. We were laughing, we were cheering, we did the whole nine. I mean, I'm sure many of you out there did the same thing. It's just, I guess, like, I looked at this franchise as sort of like the ultimate FU to everyone who's so obsessed with this one type of movie, because Marvel has so homogenized the whole industry and people can't see anything else. And I just looked at this as, like, I don't know, sort of like a subtle nod to like everyone realizing, like, yeah, we're a little ridiculous, right? Like, there's other good stuff out there. It doesn't always have to be crazy explosions and crazy superheroes. And I always felt there was some sort of like meta nature to these films, where they were almost like the outsiders of Hollywood, sort of like the forgotten about franchise that still makes the billions of dollars, that still is up there with the big boys, but for some reason doesn't play the game the same way. And so I kind of respected that about them, like almost like the outlaw action franchise that still had some roots in old action storytelling, and at least wasn't playing the whole, hey, like, butts and seats Twitter clickbait game. And somewhere along the line we lost that. But the problem is we held on to that longer than all of the rest of them, in my opinion, sort of staying true and not sort of, being a good sheep and walking the line that everyone else does. And so it's upsetting to see that, because it's like they were the last line of defense. It's like when the wall goes down in Game of Thrones and the wildlings just come right in. It's like, there's no more line of defense now. And that's just how I feel about it, because, like, with this franchise pretty much being like an Avengers film for at least 2 in a row now, with Fate and this one, it's like, okay, so we've lost all originality. Like, it's fully has died, because I can't name another big action franchise that will have its own unique sort of foot to stand on, because now this one just fits right into the drag and drop mold, the copy and paste mold that all the rest of them do, and it's just upsetting. And I mean, look, The Matrix is coming back, but we'll see what happens with that. Like,
again, keep in mind too, you still have to watch the 3 John Wick movies. That's the other thing that I'll throw
that's
your way
true
as well.
But I'm talking about, like, the saga franchises, like the MCUs, the DCEUs, the Mission Impossibles, the time-tested, tired and true, not just of a decade, but of a culture type franchises. Because this is a culture at this point. It's quite literally,
to say the least,
nicknamed the Fast and Furious cult, right? Like, that's a thing. And so, it's just like every time we have a modicum of seriousness or actual good performance, we do something stupid like keep Charlize Theron in the box. It's like, first of all, I don't know what's going on with her hair. I don't know why she can't just
Bro,
have
how
normal
did
looking
she
hair.
get it redone that quickly?
She's
I
she's
don't
got to
know.
be she's got to be one of the like most like gorgeous actresses out there right now, and her hair looks terrible in both of these movies. I don't get it. But aside from all that, let me just say, it's like she's like her and Helen Mirren, right? That's who was playing
Yeah, the mom.
Shaw's mother.
Yeah, Shaw's mother. Who is
They're
awesome
like,
in this movie, by the way. And the one other note
yeah,
that I'll throw in, Dom and her had more chemistry, I think, with any other
yes.
character that he's had with any other character in this franchise since Brian. In that one scene.
And I think another reason why I'm so upset with this film, it's like, outside of Roman being perfect for what this film has become, they give me, glimmers of what we could be, and it's so sad comparing what we could be to what we are, which is, we'll get into it with Han and John Cena in a few seconds, but it's just like, there is hope in this franchise, and for some reason we just keep taking the wrong turn, and I just can't take it.
And we thought the car puns were done, but no. The one thing that I'll give credit to Tyrese in this movie is, obviously we know that even though Tyrese is like his role, he's the buffoon, he's the commentator, he's the guy who's always the butt of every joke and all that. I'll give him credit though for this movie. This is probably the first time since his introduction to the franchise all the way back in Too Fast, Too Furious, where it actually felt like he was giving a legitimate, believable performance and not just mugging for the camera. I'll give him a lot of credit there as far as that goes.
He rebounded hard from Fate.
He wasn't doing the usual just yelling every 3 seconds. He wasn't doing everything that he was doing. It felt like he was actually taking with a modicum of seriousness. And I don't know what caused that turn, but whatever the case may be, like, I'm down with it. If this is like kind of the future that we're gonna get of Tyrese in this movie, like, it kind of worked like when they actually had the moment where they went into space and it's Ludacris is doing all the jokey lines and Tyrese is kind of just like rightfully so scared shitless. I don't know. That was the best element of the movie to me personally.
Yeah, though. To me, the problem is we've gone so silly and so zany that where I think we could have stayed more super spy, aging, a little more grounded style film, it's going to be hard for them, I think. We already know they have 5 films on the board. They have this potential Dominic Toretto origin story, which Vin Diesel's been pushing hard for years. They have F10 and 11, and there's at least 2 Hobbs and Shaw films.
Don't
so
forget
it's like
also the female Fast and Furious spinoff that we've heard about that's been rumored as well.
True. So it's like, at least the females are recast, but for all those other ones, I mean, I don't know if you noticed this, everyone's looking old. There's only so much makeup can hide, and they're looking old.
I will say, I agree with you for the most part with everyone else, but I will say Michelle Rodriguez has never looked better. I will say that. Michelle,
no.
I don't know. With the short hair, Michelle Rodriguez has never looked better.
They looked great, all of them, but they looked older. You can really
older.
see from 2017
older.
To now, they have aged quite a bit, and this film was pushed back a year.
Yes, it was.
So
it
it's
was
like,
supposed to open originally April of last year. So
we can begin shooting now, and they're even older. I don't know, but anyways, we got to keep this podcast moving and talking about other topics.
We got to keep the gas and the Nas fueled. So
we do. So you guys let us know. Was Roman right? Is this the new Marvel? As much as I hate to say that, it might be. But anyways, let us know in the comments below. Give this video a like. Turn on that bell so you never miss when we post a video. And of course, please subscribe. Dom, did you know that 17% of your YouTube subscribers aren't subscribed to your channel?
Yes.
You guys could change that. You guys could subscribe right now and help us change that statistic.
I was waiting for that bit to come back. That's like the greatest bit you've ever come up with, I think, throughout the history of this podcast. But let's get into it. Let's get into the Han of it all, right? So there were obviously 2 big things that we knew going into this movie, besides the fact that they were going to outer space. Like, that's been talked about to death. We know that. Like, we'll get into that a little bit later. But we knew that John Cena was going to be playing Dom's brother. And it's funny because, like, the minute that I heard that John Cena was cast in this movie, I'm like, okay, so he's got to be either a cousin or a brother. And then they said it in the trailer. I'm like, wow, so we're getting to the point where even the trailer is, like, guessing the things beforehand. Like, I called it being that Cypher had Dom's kid, and that's the only thing that she had on Dom is to get him to turn bad. And I called that, and that wasn't even revealed in the trailer. And I called that John Cena was going to be his brother. And so I guess we're like overstepping a little. We're going to talk about the John Cena of it first. But you brought up a really interesting point last night after we were done with the theater, which was so fucking accurate, and I can't believe I didn't realize this, where, what was it you said? Something along the lines of, like, they found a way way to use John Cena without actually using John Cena, something like that? Like, you tell, because you'll be able to tell it better than I can.
Yeah, so we're watching this film with friends of the podcast, of course, Patrick W. Huber and the
Professor
Cerulli
Pat.
twins, who all of you guys know. And I was sitting next to Chris, the younger of the Cerulli twins by a few minutes, and he was him and I were like, he turned to me and he's like, dude, John Cena's so flat. And I was like, yeah, thank God he's like only saying like 5-word sentences and like barely speaking. If you guys noticed, he was more, his character was in the film a lot in the flashbacks. He was barely in the film and he was the villain. I could not, there must have been some editing that went on where they're like, dude, this guy can barely read his lines. He was so terrible. He's going back and forth with Charlize Theron.
So bad.
A modern day powerhouse, such an elegant and stunning performer who's doing too much of a performance in this film. Like, she's too good for this movie.
Too.
Yeah, she's too. Yeah, she's in a box and she's giving an amazing performance. Like, she's just that good of an actress that it doesn't matter. The script could be terrible. She could be reading a bubblegum commercial and she's still gonna sell it and make you invested in it. And then you have John Cena.
Looks like a box.
Yeah, John Cena's head and forehead and chin look like a box, and they even comment on his chin in this movie. And he's clearly looks so old now. I grew up watching WWE. John Cena looks old as fuck, dude, and it's so sad to see. And she's just like giving her all, and he's just like firing back with the most monotone, terrible lines. And that must have been a scene that they couldn't edit out, because if you guys notice, as the rest of the film went on, and I know they don't shoot films chronologically, but they definitely cut out a lot of John Cena's talking and they really just kept his action. Like, half the film, his appearance, John Cena, not the actor who's playing him, his character in the flashbacks, but actual physical John Cena, is just grappling across London for like a 5-minute span. Like, he has 5 minutes of screen time off in the distance as a grapple, aka his stunt double was on screen more than him. It was phenomenal, dude. I loved it. Like, they knew what they were doing. Editing is one hell of a drug. I'll tell you that much.
Is, as we've learned from our friend Brando Critic, is the thing that truly does make movies. I've heard stories about how a movie will absolutely suck and an editor will somehow save it. And I could not agree more, because I also just want to point out the irony too, right? That Vin Diesel and The Rock had such this gigantic feud going on. And what's their solution? Oh, we're just going to bring in another wrestler, because that won't cause any other problems on set at all. Look, John Cena's had a long history in Hollywood now, and it's kind of been like a back and forth response to him, right? When he first broke in, first off WWE, they were putting him in all these terrible action movies, these direct-to-DVD movies. He was in like 5 of these movies called The Marine, right? I remember the first time I saw him in a movie was with this movie called 12 Rounds that came out in 2009, where he went up against Littlefinger from Game of Thrones, basically, back when he was playing villains all the time, basically where he had to play this game of 12, like doing 12 challenges around the city. Kind of like, almost, it was like a Die Hard 3 ripoff, basically, where he had to save his girlfriend by doing all these weird challenges. It was weird, and I didn't take anything away from him. And then I saw him in this movie called Legendary, which is like a kind of a generic, like, coming of age, sports drama, kind of a geeky kid, wants to get into wrestling. So he wants to connect with his brother, who's a former wrestler, who's played by John Cena. I think John Cena was only like 30, 31 at the time, but even still, I'm like, dude, you are not 25. You are not 25. Like, that's just that obvious. So, but in recent years, he's kind of undergone this weird phenomenon where he's been in a lot of these comedies, and from what I've heard, they've actually like suited him really well, because I think, weirdly enough, right, we've talked about this a lot, I feel like, with a lot of different wrestlers that have made the transition over into film, right? First with The Rock, obviously, then with Dave Bautista, and now I feel like with John Cena really coming into his own, right? And John Cena is obviously going to do the whole Dave Bautista route, obviously, when he appears in the Suicide Squad later this year. And the thing that I've heard is that when he's in a comedy, the comedy is played to his sensibilities. And the whole thing, right, which I've heard James Gunn talk about this, and it actually makes a lot of sense as to why he seems to work the best with wrestlers, which is that wrestlers already have this gigantic personality from their WWE days, right? And so the whole problem that Hollywood has always had, and it's not just with wrestlers, right? I feel like every time they try to bring other personalities from other elements of the entertainment industry, right? It's why they always have a hard time with musicians, with, which is every other facet of the entertainment industry, which is that, look, it is folly to try and squeeze these already established personas into trying to play these other characters, right? Obviously, we know that's the foundation of acting, but you're not hiring these guys for their acting ability, right? You're hiring them for their personality and because they're a big-name draw, right? So why do you try to squeeze them into this box? Like, the reason why James Gunn made Drax the Destroyer work as well as he did was because he intentionally allowed that character to play to Batista's strengths and allowed him to like flex and use his personality. It also helps that Batista actually like is actually a pretty damn good actor and like actually like pays attention and does these cues, I feel like, way better than The Rock and John Cena does. But in a weird way, I feel like that's what happened with all these comedies that John Cena was in, right? They hired him because it's easy to do celebrity cameos and in comedies, right? And so that's what worked with his movie when he popped up in Trainwreck, right? Is that he's kind of playing to these they're playing to his sensibilities. He's not really having to play this part. And then he did the same thing with this other kind of lower down comedy that came out a couple of years ago, and the latest of a long line of super bad ripoffs that came in the last couple of years called Blockers, right? That movie with, like, I still think has one of the cleverest titles, I think, ever, but where he plays one of the 3 single dads that is trying to stop them. And from what I heard, he's actually, like, pretty good and pretty funny in that movie. And the minute that I heard he was cast in the Suicide Squad and saw him in that trailer, I'm like, oh, perfect. Gunn's going to do the same thing that he did with Bautista in Guardians of the Galaxy, where he's going to allow him to play to his sensibilities. And that's the mistake they made with this movie, is they cast him in this movie for his personality, but they tried to actually have him play a part because they're trying to actually have him act opposite Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel, we know, obviously, has his own persona and does his own thing, but Vin Diesel, at the end of the day, is an actor, and John Cena is not. And so you know it's embarrassing when you see John Cena and Vin Diesel in a room, and Vin Diesel still is acting circles around him, even with his typical grunts, and that's the mistake they made with this movie with John Cena. And of course, they didn't realize it until they were on set, and by then it was already too late, so they just had to rely on the editing. So that's kind of like my whole take on the John Cena of it all, right? Because you're right, like, props to the younger actor who played him. Finn Cole, that guy, first off, way better than the guy who played young Dom. Like, I just felt bad. Also, I wanted to comment also on the Cypher comment, besides the fact that she commented on his chin, which was hilarious, the fact that she did the mixed bloodlines thing, because I'm pretty sure that Dom has shifted nationalities 3 times in this franchise. I think he started off like they were kind of vague about it, but I think he started off as Hispanic. Then he kind of shifted into this weird, like, pseudo-Italian phase around Fast 5 and 6, and now he's back and it's fully confirmed that he's Hispanic. That's right. When we know that his dad was played by Hispanic. So, like, just the fact that she commented is like, wow, I knew the Torettos had some mixed bloodlines. That comment had me, I almost vomited how hard I was laughing with that comment in the theater.
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's just like one of those things where this film has not been able to sort of figure a few things out, let alone maybe more than just a few things. But with that being said, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. So I think it's time to jump into our next segment here. So that was the John Cena of it all. You guys know the deal. Subscribe, like, and comment. But now let's talk about the Han of it all.
And I love it, too, because, like, Justin Lin, the whole thing of why they were able to do kind of like that perfect crescendo at the end of 6, right, and kind of tie it back into Tokyo Drift, is the fact that Justin Lin was making that his last movie. And the whole thing of Justin Lin's kind of investment in this franchise was because he was able to bring in the Han character, who I'll get into, because fun fact, the character of Han as portrayed by Sung Kang is not actually exclusive to the Fast and Furious franchise. That's actually a character that Justin Lin originated in the movie that he directed right before Tokyo Drift that actually got him the Tokyo Drift job. It's this movie called Better Luck Tomorrow, where Sung Kang plays the character of Han. And all these years later, Justin Lin in interviews has gone out of his way. I don't remember when. I think it was like around 6, I think, when he was doing the promotion for 6, where they basically asked him, they're like, yeah, like, Sung Kang, the character that he plays, he's got a lot of similarities to this guy, to this character that he also played in Better Luck Tomorrow. And Justin Lin basically came out and said, yeah, it's the same guy. So Better Luck Tomorrow is essentially like kind of the whole Fast and Furious of it all. And the whole thing of why he said goodbye to Han in 6 was because that was Justin Lin saying goodbye to the franchise. And his whole thing is, okay, Han is my one character that I get to bring to this franchise. And so, of course, when it was revealed that Justin Lin was coming back to direct this movie right after James Wan and F. Gary Gray and everything that they had to deal with their movies that they directed with 7 and 8, of course, right? I mean, I shouldn't have been as surprised as I was, given this franchise's, like, history of what they've done with certain characters. But, oh, man. Like, first in the trailer, and then, like, you're waiting the whole movie for him to come back. And that shot when Han takes out the guys with the sniper and he stands up and he's got the blue lighting on his face and he's got the haircut, I'm like, Justin Lin has been waiting his entire fucking career to do that shot because it was awesome. Like, the actual role that Han plays in this movie, kind of generic as well, but, like, I just needed to get into the origin because, like, it's just so awesome that, like, Justin Lin has had this, like, intimate relationship with this character that he's kind of been able to pull from this kind of, you know, this like, kind of indie movie that he directed, and now have this awesome trajectory to go on to be one of the more beloved characters in the franchise. Like, that's the whole thing. that kind of stung, like when he came back both in 4 and then in 5 and then 6, was you're like, oh shit, wait a minute, at some point they're gonna have to tie this around to Tokyo Drift, and then they do it, and you're kind of stung a little bit, because like you're like, oh shit, like I kind of miss Han, because that was at the point where they were dropping bodies. First Vince in 5, then Giselle in 6, then Han, obviously with the whole reason of how they bring in Deckard Shaw, to the point where there's only like 5 of them left of like the original team, right? But now Han comes back, and this is, I think, where, even though I love the character of Han, and I love seeing him back, and I love any excuse to have Sung Kang on, because you want to talk about a man that exudes charisma without having to do anything. Sung Kang is one of them, but this is where my problems start, because the problem is that, look, we already know that Tokyo Drift has been retroactively put into this franchise in, like, I think the worst way possible. Is I still find it hilarious that we're expected to believe that Tokyo Drift takes place after Fast 6, which came out in 2013, where there are obvious references to Tokyo Drift that place it in 2006. So that just always makes me laugh. And that's
Lil Bow Wow.
Who ain't so little anymore in this movie anymore. But, like, they are bending over backwards with the amount of retconning that they're having to do with Han's character. Like even with the amount of explaining that Roman is having to do, where it's like, yeah, can you get to the part where you blew up in a car? And then it's like, oh, so Mr. Nobody, like, what, like, had, like, a pulley that he just pulled him from the car, like, randomly? Like, I can't explain it. Like, take it from here, man, because I gotta get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I want to cover new ground, so I'll just go back and say I pretty much agree with everything you just said. I think Justin Lin got his moment. I think Han got his moment. It was a very well shot sequence, albeit very convenient. The fact that the
Very
first place
convenient.
they go to in Japan, as Letty sits down and they're eating, she looks up, there's the Mexican flag. Some thugs come and attack them, and then down from that same alley, when they had their suspicions, there is Han saving the day, of course, and then off screen they meet up and they reconnect. Very convenient, but you know what? This movie had a lot of plot to cover, and it's a bit of those Endgame and Infinity War isms, where it's just a quick assembly of the team. You get it, you understand it, it's a movie, you forgive it. So they at least made it cinematic and fulfilling, and I think it was a great ode to the character of Han, because he is, I think, one of the most beloved characters. So my issue with Han and with this part of the show doesn't fall with Justin Lin, doesn't fall with the character of Han or the actor. I think that I love the fact that this pair has been through so much together. I think he has such a charisma and chemistry with the rest of the cast. He's such a natural performer. You can really see the movies he's in definitely go up a peg just because he's there. Whereas when he's not, Fate of the Furious, it's a little
Yeah.
tougher to make up for. So what I want to talk about with Han is what him coming back to the franchise does to a series that we know of at least 6 possible movies, if not more, going forward. There's no stakes anymore. You
Nope.
know, you said at
Nope.
least back in the day, we knew that Han was on borrowed time because we had
Yeah.
seen what happened in Tokyo
Yeah.
Drift. And of course, there was other deaths in the franchise of major cast members, which said, if something goes wrong, we might not be as invincible as Roman would have us believe.
Right.
But now we've taken that away. And now we've kind of gotten to this realm of, well, there are these infinity stones and this tesseract and this alternate universe. And, you know, the snap might be able to be reversed. And so that's my biggest problem with Marvel. My biggest problem with Marvel, and honestly with most comic books, but the DCEU hasn't had as great of legs as Marvel to run and cover as much ground as the MCU has. So the MCU is going to be at the front of this criticism. When I say, why do I care? Why do I want to keep watching this if I just know what's going to happen? You know, I don't expect Vin Diesel to get killed off, but I mean, you know, Letty was dead and she comes back. It's just, I don't understand how we've come into this, and I think it's, you know, for as much as it is a creator problem and a studio problem, I think all those guys got to follow the money, right?
Of
I
course.
think I think it's like, you want to work and you want to do what you love. And if you're a filmmaker and you get the opportunity, like I've said before, to direct a Fast and Furious film, you cannot say no to that. You know, it's a billion-dollar franchise. Your name is now attached to one of the highest grossing action franchises of all time, and you can't say no to that. But at the same time, the audience doesn't demand as much from the creators
No.
as I would maybe hope, or for whatever reason why we're okay with just sort of rinsing and repeating every 3 to 4 years, because maybe with social media we forget about the film that came prior, and so we're just okay with the same thing just in a different setting. And sure, that's fine, that's fun, I get it, but this is like, it's become procedural in a sense where it's like, All right, well, what are they going to get into this week? Oh, God, they almost died, but we know it's only episode 8 of a 22-episode season on the CW right now, so they're going to be back next week. But hey, that was kind of fun for a little while. I shut off my life. I shut off work. And it's all right, cool. But, like, I don't really want that. I want the older days of the Fast and Furious to come back. Like, I want to believe that when they're flying through that satellite in outer space, there actually might be a chance that Roman and Tej might not survive, and they are literally doing this sacrifice play for the team. But you knew they were going to land back down. You knew they were going to be at that barbecue at the end, and I think it's Han, it's it's Letty coming back. It's so many moments that have now, I think, come together to just show that, well, we've kind of lost what made this series special, what made this franchise a little different than the rest of the homogenized action franchises that we have going around right now. And that's upsetting. It takes me out of it a little bit, because part
Yeah.
of the fun was the insanity and the jokes and everything I liked about this movie, yes. But also another part of the fun for this franchise for so long was like, cool. It is ridiculous, it is zany, but like, characters can die and they will die if something happens. And we kind of lost that.
Yeah.
And it's a little upsetting.
Yeah, you're right. And honestly, I can only imagine how much not only a slap of a face it's going to be when they inevitably bring back Gal Gadot for the next two, because you know that they're going to find one. Even though
They have
Mr. Nobody had that moment in the flashback with Han where he was like, when Giselle died, I'm like, come on, there's no effing way. There's no effing way.
That's the fake out.
It was a fake out beyond fake outs. Like, they're going to have a thing. I still want them to do a moon base, right? And where Cypher, because we know obviously that it's going to tie around to Hobbs and Shaw, where Cypher is a part of that evil organization that made Brixton in the last one. And they're going to be driving cars and bouncing on the moon, and they're going to have another, like, death cannon that's going to blow up the Earth unless they can fucking race against time in order to stop it. And what I really heard, which I thought would be awesome, is if, like, so people were throwing out, like, okay, who are some other, like, Academy caliber actors that we want to see in this movie? And somebody threw out Daniel Kaluuya, and in my brain, I went to the mindset where I'm like, oh, shit, Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out as Idris Elba's son, as young Brixton? I'm like,
That'd be cool.
Man.
So
man.
It seems like you're already in our next segment, so let's just get there if you're cool with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah.
So, guys, before we jump into the last segment, I don't know, let us know what you think. Are we, just analyzing this too much? I mean, it's like, I saw a Brando critic tweet. He's like, did you guys actually expect this movie to be good? He's like, but also I'm going to do a serious critique of it because it's what I do. And it's like, yeah, I want to do that too, because I think like we need to beg the question of our art. But like, was there stakes for you guys? Are we just like becoming snobby in our 3+ years now of doing a podcast? Let us know in the comments below if we're justified or if we're not. Please like this video and of course hit that bell to get notified. And Dom, you were already taking us there, so it seems like you have so many thoughts. Like, where do you see this franchise going, man?
Dude, I mean, look, we know obviously that they've hinted heavily that they're going to do a crossover with Jurassic Park and Transformers and all of these other things. But, like, I was already just speculating as far as what it goes. Because, I mean, we watched Hobbs and Shaw a couple weeks ago, right? Even though Hobbs and Shaw is very clearly spinning off into its own universe, they're also still kind of tied in a weird way, even though Vin Diesel and The Rock kind of hate each other. I think that the biggest mistake that this franchise made as far as not dealing with that before it got too bad, which was kind of playing into the rivalry and actually putting it on screen. Because, like, by the time we get to 7, right, Dom and Hobbs on screen are, like, best buddies. But, like, you could tell in 7, like, when Dom and Hobbs have a hospital room where it's like, oh god, these guys fucking hate each other in real life too, I feel like if they played into that a little bit more, I feel like that may have solved some of the issues as far as that goes, with kind of their behind the scenes thing. But like, dude, fucking Moonbase, I said this after we got out of the movie last night. Moonbase in the next one, where they take down that cyber terrorist organization that Brixton is a part of. And then in the next movie, they find out, they had a contingency plan where they opened a portal to an alternate universe, and now we got dinosaurs coming through. Dude, I'm telling you, like, even though I know there are no stakes in this franchise, it's essentially become Marvel, but they have the one thing that Marvel does not do, which is that Marvel, with the amount of crazy shit that they've thrown in, Marvel is still playing and grounded, and they're still doing that same old MCU thing, which is why I'm not necessarily gravitating towards some of the newer properties that they've been putting out on Disney+. My whole thing with the franchise, though, is that I'm like, look, you can give me as much bullshit as you want, but go for it. Make it as fucking dumb as possible. And this franchise still goes for it, even though, yes, I agree with you 1,000%. It is predictable, and it has jumped the shark, and there are no stakes, and they are just going to bring back characters willy-nilly. But, dude, the way that I see it is that if they could do the type of stupid shit that internet fanboys have been theorizing about for years and actually do that on the big screen, like, dude, how long were people asking for a remake of Godzilla vs. Kong with the new CG? And then we got it, you know? Like, come on. Like, the possibilities are literally endless. Like, they literally went into outer space. People joked about them going into outer space for years, and then they did it. Like, the possibilities are literally endless. So my whole thing is I'm like, okay, you're going to slide into generic territory with your plot. Okay, I won't like it, but whatever. You're going to fucking start copying Marvel with the MacGuffins and the alternate universes and the one-off villains, whatever. Okay, fine. But do it stupidly and continue to do it with as much gusto and as little fucks given as possible. Because, oh man, I'll say this much, dude. When I see in the trailer that they're racing around on the moon, literally with laser guns attached to cars, taking out like a death cannon, I'm gonna be first in line to buy that ticket, because like this is what these movies are. And then, like, to quote Lenny, this is what these movies are, and this is what they have become officially, you know? And I think the only thing that I'm not a fan of, and it sucks because I knew inevitably that we were gonna get there at some point, and I know it's gonna be blasphemous, and I'm saying when it happens. I made a $40 bet last night with one of the Cerulli twins, and I'm sticking by it.
Did you really?
I swear. I got to text him in order to confirm it, but I'm like, I will put money on this shit
with
right
Joe?
now with Joe. And I'm like, and you are going to be owing me $40 in 2 or 3 years when this movie comes out.
For the record, Chris did not care enough to enter a $40 bet. That's just how I know. Just so the audience knows.
No, because Joe is doing that thing that he always does, which is thinking it's like, oh, you know, yeah, this franchise has a history, or the movies have a history of doing this stuff, but they won't go that far. And I'm just like, dude, as far as I'm concerned, with the new age or whatever we're in of Hollywood, all bets are off. All bets are off as far as how stupid they can go. My whole thing is I just want to see how stupid they can go. Because that, like, I'm like, dude, I give it props. I give it props when they're able to get that stupid. But I'm saying when. I'm calling this shit right now. When they bring back Paul Walker for the next 2 movies, dude, I'm going to be happily counting my $40 when I win that bet. But at the same time, that's the only element where I'm like, oh, this is getting into blasphemous territory, let's call it. And I never say that about this franchise, but that would be the moment where it's like, after we went out of our way to do that beautiful tribute to him that you did in Fast 7, which, in a way, kind of saved that movie. Let's be completely honest here. Like, that tribute at the end kind of saved that movie as far as that goes. But, yeah, it just kind of factors into my point of everything else. That
well, real quick, just because the YouTube algorithm wants you to say this within the first minute, we're not promoting gambling. This isn't financial advice or anything like that. It's all in good fun.
Yes.
I kid you not, YouTube would flag this video had we not said that. Now keep going, Dom.
Yes.
And we'll leave this one in just so the audience can see the games we have to play as content creators.
Just so that they understand, yes. But when they bring back Paul Walker and they do the thing that they did with his brothers, but this time it's going to be even more seamless. I mean, it was seamless when they did it back in 2015, but when they do it again, I don't know, man. Like you had some very strong opinions on that, so you let me know your thoughts on that.
I think the fact that he's still in this universe is just disrespectful, because they demoted him to being a babysitter, which arguably the safest babysitter you could ever have, but it's not funny, it's not cute, it's disrespectful. I mean, it's like, you know, like there's a reason they're not recasting Chadwick Boseman in the MCU, right? You know, be a little more cognizant of, in this case, the man who kept the franchise going when everyone else walked away from it. The only reason you're here right now is because of Paul Walker and his commitment to his art. And so the fact that you do that, it's like you give us something by naming the child after him, but then you keep him around and you just demote him to this, oh, we don't need him. I mean, think about other messages that you're sending. I know that they didn't mean it in a disrespectful way, but like, you're diminishing every contribution he made, every big save he made, every like reason why you guys succeeded the mission, being so rooted in him and Dom, like coming down to the final, you know, hour of every film. You're just like saying, oh, we don't need him anymore. We've passed his skill set, his talents. I don't know. To me, it lacks taste, and I don't think it's a respectful way to handle it. So if they do put the, you know, Paul Walker CGI in there, that might be where I walk away from the franchise. I mean, I might not cover this anymore. You might be finding Phil and co-hosts, and I'll say that on record because I just think that's a little too much. You know,
Yeah.
it's a little too much.
I
If
mean,
his brothers want to get into the acting game, great, but they don't need to recast. They don't need to CGI his face onto his brother's physique. They could just enter the franchise and be a relative. They'd probably already look like each other. It'd be believable. So there's other ways to do it.
yeah, like the
If
one
he
thing I'll
retires,
say-
he retires.
Right.
But this
The
isn't
one-
retirement. This is reducing him to being a child sitter when the man is equally as capable of a super spy as the rest of them, and the reason they're even alive for the majority of this franchise.
Yeah, it's, you know what it is? It's a fast. So Fast 7, obviously, it was an impossible situation that they overcame, and so like the reason why it works there is because again, it's both an ode to Paul and kind of an achievement of wow, they made this work in the best and most tasteful way possible as far as
Yes.
that goes. And even in 8, with all the bad elements, like we've gone on record to say that Fate is our least favorite of this franchise, right? But the thing at the very least that movie did is that movie, both by not having Mia included in it at all, there was some plausible deniability as to why the two of them weren't around, right? But now we're getting into this point where it's like, okay, the franchise is keeping on going, and now where it's like, oh, okay, how long can we do? It's like, oh, we brought Han back. Why don't we literally bring Paul Walker back? And it's almost like kind of the franchise is, it's almost like it's got like too much ego for its own good as far as, oh, we could do this, we could do anything as far as that goes. And I feel like that's kind of the mentality that they're taking with the Paul Walker thing. And I know they don't mean it in bad taste, but it's getting to a point where it's like, oh, are you sure you want to do this? Like, again, like I know we're all about like moving forward for forward's sake, but like there's a certain point where you start to disrespect what came beforehand, you know?
Exactly. I don't think it's in poor taste, but I just think it's the same thing as animating Carrie Fisher a year after she died. It's just something you don't do. You know, it's like be a human and detach yourself from the dollars because you're already going to rake it in. You're the Fast and Furious. You're Star Wars. You're already going to rake it in. So please, like, you know, let's not do that. It's not needed. And it's the world we live in. These are the rules we have to play by, I suppose.
It sucks because, like, this is what happens. Like, when it's not just that, like, these are, like, kind of like secondary characters. These are main characters where the actors pass, right? We've had this 3 times now. Paul Walker, Carrie Fisher, and now Chadwick Boseman. It's like, I really do feel for the studios in that sense because it's like, what do they do from then on, you know, as far as that goes, with the exception of, like, kind of killing off the characters or keeping them around, but in a way where it's like they're not a part of the main action. It's a really, really tricky, tight line to walk, and it really only works, like, occasionally, and I think the reason why I'm throwing so much shade here is because they made it work. They made it happen, and now for them to kind of retroactively go back and change that, that's where I'm like, oh, okay, you know?
Right.
Like the whole thing with Boseman, we don't know yet. We know that they're going to do something, but we don't know yet what they're going to do with Black Panther 2. And we obviously saw what happened with Carrie Fisher, Rise of Skywalker. Let's be honest, that movie was kind of doomed long, but like outside of anything having to do with her death, but like just seeing it done there, and just with how they were kind of able to utilize her, just to keep her in the movie, it's like, why? Just why? You know, there's nothing to be gained from there as far as that goes, you know?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think either way, we need to just forget about what we're doing with Brian right now and just stop, because it just keeps becoming more and more cringe and more just disrespectful. And it's like, at least with the Carrie Fisher one, I didn't think to myself like, man, like, you know, she wasn't just a celebrity, like people actually knew her, and like, what are you putting them through? And they keep dragging Paul Walker's name around, and it's like, man, like do you guys think about if his family wants to keep hearing about him like on screen? And it's like, do you guys think about that? His friends, like, do you guys think about his super fans who like because of his strength in the movies, like art has an effect on people. Like it just doesn't seem like they're thinking about how they're preserving this man's contribution to the franchise. And so at the risk of repeating myself, I think that's where I'll leave it in regards to this final segment and the Paul Walker of it all. So yeah. Shall we jump into our star ratings? Or
yeah, the only thing that I'll say as far as my final thoughts is that, you know, that when, I'm going to say when, I'm putting it out there, that when Brian makes his return to this franchise, you know off the top of your head, the studio is paying his family like $20 million, like minimum. Like the family will be compensated as far as that goes, but it still doesn't feel right as far as that goes. But yeah, so final thoughts, star ratings. F9. Man, what else can you say about it that hasn't already been said? Look, we all know this franchise quite literally has a momentum that cannot be stopped, so we know that any actual bout of criticism that we lobby this movie's way is not going to make a damn bit of difference as far as how much money this movie's made. This movie's already launched like the second or third highest grossing movie of this year so far, and it is not stopping anytime soon. This franchise is not stopping anytime soon. It is unstoppable, quite literally. But with that being said, this is a very flawed movie. It has a lot of elements that don't work, but it also has a lot of elements that just allow you to just sit back and have fun with it. And I don't say that too often. Like, in fact, like, my whole thing is I fucking hate when people say, oh, just turn your brain off, just enjoy it for what it is. That shit drives me nuts most of the time. That was not an intentional pun, I'll throw that out there. But the one thing that I will say is that I definitely probably had more fun with this movie, and I definitely, then really, I feel like only a couple other I feel like I only had this much fun with like a couple of other movies that came out this year, but like there's just a certain feeling that I get when I know that I'm watching a Fast and Furious movie, and I really didn't have it for the last two movies. It really wasn't there for Fate of the Furious, and it wasn't there for Hobbs and Shaw. So even though this movie is heavily flawed and has a lot of problems, both for this movie itself and for the franchise going forward, I will still say that I had a joyous time both times that I watched it in the theaters, but I can't go super high. I'm giving this movie 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Nice. Yeah, no, that makes sense. For me, it was obviously a step forward from Fate of the Furious, and Hobbs and Shaw is really cool, and I enjoy it. It's just unfortunate that it's a sort of spin-off and not main canon. It sucks that we have those issues because I really love the Statham and Rock character with Vin Diesel in the same movie. Those were enjoyable rides, but I guess we're not going to get those for much longer. But yeah, I don't know. I think, like you said, it has a lot of flaws. It clearly is, like Tyrese has said, it's it's become something that we don't even know what it's become, really, in a sense. I mean, the fact that you can ask if they're superheroes or not in the middle of the movie is pretty hilarious, and depending on how you watch movies, potentially pretty detrimental to your experience. But I didn't let that get me down too much because I kind of knew what I was in for. And so that's why I'm going to walk away from this one saying it's a 3-star movie. It is, unfortunately, the second worst on my top 10 Fast and Furious ranking. It's right in front of Fate of the Furious, which comes in at number 10 out of 10. But I think I had more fun with it than some other installments. However, it was not the best movie. So that's why it's kind of a 3-star, lower tier on the rankings. But hey, if they're making like 15 more, I imagine this one's going to go up a few pegs. Yeah, I can't see them getting much better.
Definitely. I'll say that as far as my overall rankings go, I have this ranked above both Fate and Hobbs and Shaw, only because, like I said, that Fast and Furious feeling that obviously wasn't there for Hobbs and Shaw because it's a spin-off. That one, as much fun as I had with that movie, that still feels like kind of more of like a little bit of this, just a regular action movie kind of that just happens to feature 2 Fast and Furious cast members. And Fate, we know, is unequivocally the worst, but this comes in at like third to last, right in front of those two as far as that goes. The only other thing that I wanted to bring up was, which I will say was just personally satisfying for me, besides the fact that the Tokyo Drift guys finally actually got to come to a barbecue and actually got to play a substantial part in the main canon movies that's not just like a cameo. I will say, I don't know if you felt this way, it was very, very satisfying seeing Sean hug Han again at the end. That just made me happy. I know it like was all for flaws and all kind of at fault, and the how we got there was effing stupid and kind of disrespectful in a lot of different senses and to the detriment of the overall franchise. But that moment, that did make me happy, where it's like, oh man, this franchise, they really have come. That was Justin Lin's true full circle moment from like where he started with this franchise. So I just wanted to throw that. I did really like that moment.
For that reason, it was cool, but I kind of thought they have, since Tokyo Drift, been disrespecting the movie every time they bring it up.
Yeah, they have, which sucks, because Tokyo Drift is legitimately great. Like, can we just put that to bed right now?
My favorite one.
Tokyo Drift is not a bad movie. In fact, Tokyo Drift is actually really fucking awesome and an exceptionally well-made movie.
It's the best one, in my opinion.
Let's put that whole Tokyo Drift is not good to bed, because it's just blatantly not true as far as that goes. Because they've even found a way to make Sean work in the movies going forward. As much as we made fun of him in that Tokyo Drift first time watch. But you guys can check that out by tuning in to our full Fast and Furious first time watch series. All 8 episodes for all 8 of the movies before this are officially up on YouTube. We did it. We've officially made it. We've reviewed F9. Make sure you tune in this coming week for the rankings that are coming for when we officially rank these movies. It's going to be fucking insane. I cannot wait. It is still something that I'm going to wait. It's something that I'm still waiting to hype up until actually, like, when we're there on Wednesday in order for you guys to see. But it is going to be an episode unlike anything that we have ever done on this show before. And what are your thoughts on F9 and the Fast and Furious saga just in general? It's been a long road, but we finally made it to the finish line. So leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to click the like button and the subscribe button on this video. That way you guys can get notified every time we put up new content online. Chris, where could the good people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, they can find me all of the same places that our podcast is available, that being Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the whole nine, at Christian Evanko, Evanko spelled Evanko. Just like our podcast, I have a link in my bio as well, where you can not only find the Talkin TV podcast, but you can find my music. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, all the same places we are, my music is. Amazon, Google Play, so please go check it out through the link in my bio. Let me know what you think, and if you're one of my YouTube guys, you can let me know in a comment on any of those social medias, or just in the comments below in this video if you want to double back and be like, yo Chris, I checked out your music, it was pretty cool, or this, that, and the other thing. Just go listen to it, guys. I'd really appreciate it. I'm working on a bunch of new material to be coming out sooner than later, and I can't wait for you to hear it, as well as I have another podcast about music, life, and everything in between called Talkin. Talkin spelled the same way we spell it here, with Andrew and Chris, again available through the link in my bio. Please check it out. I hope to see you there. And of course, go follow my good friend Dom, man. Where can they find you?
At Movie Nerd Reviews. Oh, man. At Movie Nerd Reviews. That's how you can tell it was a late night last night. At Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram. And also be sure to follow me where I more actively post on our social media profiles for this podcast right here, the Talkin TV podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talkin TV podcast. All one word. I post several times during the week. That way you guys can get notified and kind of keep up to date on everything that we've got going on in the channel. Guys, again, it's been a long road. Thank you guys so much for being with us every single step of the way. We'll see you guys again in a couple years when we cover F10 and 11 and Hobbs and Shaw 2 and 3 and however many goddamn spin-offs we do. Oh, man, we're just when we thought we were out, we have the track, the street pulled us right back in, Chris. It's been a blast being able to show you these movies and being able to experience this franchise with you. People, as always, you know the drill. 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys.